is not an agenda that should be forced on the working people of our country who already pay their share. Unfortunately, the majority in Congress this year passed a federal budget plan that raises taxes by somewhere between $250 billion and $400 billion over the next 5 years. And this year alone, we're adding $115 billion to last year's spending level if the House-passed budget bills become a reality. Stop and think for a moment how truly incomprehensible that figure is. If you went on a $1,000 spending spree today, and you spent $1,000 every day after that, you wouldn't reach $1 billion until you'd shopped every day for the next 2,740 years. But the federal government spends $1 billion around every 4 hours, and the Democrats in the House, the majority in the House, want to add $115 billion to next year's budget over what we're spending right now. Over the years, the government has really managed to creep into every section of American life. Increasingly intrusive, increasingly over-regulating. Today, our government makes first contact with you before you're born and doesn't let go until after you die. And literally after you die, not just when you die. We have programs that take care of you in the womb, programs that work right alongside the doctor when you're born. We have programs that are with you when you take your first steps. We have federal programs for child care. We have federal programs for gifted students and for failing students. We have federal programs for delinquency and ADD. We have federal programs to teach kids how to swim and jog and play tennis. We have federal programs that teach young people how to do proper setups and what snacks to avoid after dinner. Most of those things aren't the job of the federal of the government at all, and if they are arguably the job of government, they're certainly not the job of the federal government, but they're there and in place. And as you grow older, the government will help you buy a home. It'll encourage you how to fix it up with tax policies and how to sell it and get a bigger one. And when today's youngest workers retire, the government will give them back a little bit of what they paid into the Social Security system and is spending the rest right now to provide services that you don't even know that you couldn't live without, and frankly, you probably could live without those services. 3 generations of post-New Deal efforts to rein in the size of government have resulted in short bursts of success, sandwiched in between long periods of disappointments. And frankly, it's not hard to understand why. Because while it's easy to oppose big government in the abstract, when it comes to specifics, the entrenched interests protect every government program as if their livelihoods depended on it. And of course, often their livelihoods do depend on it. And the energy generated by somebody who's about to lose something is so much more dynamic than the energy generated by people who are paying that bill along with many others. The competition is hard to come up with. Remembering the $40 billion cuts in entitlements that we shepherded through the last Congress, and some of the hardest work, frankly, anybody's ever seen done legislatively, it seems that we were working so hard, like we were trying to almost drain the swamp with a teaspoon, and here months later, it's being filled back up with a fire hose. And the level of complaint of filling up those new ideas and new programs nowhere close to the level of complaint that you got from intense groups, segmented groups of people who couldn't imagine that we were going to cut $40 billion worth of growth out of these entitlement programs over the next 5 years. Some of our members said, gee, that's so little it's hardly worth the effort. Had to remind them how much it takes to get to $40 billion, but that's what we did. This time, we're not only going in the other direction in the discretionary budget, as I said, we're going in the other direction to the tune of $115 billion of new spending. So what do we do? in order to try to get the upper hand on government spending, one of the things that I've advocated is that we have a pay-go system for any new programs. For a new program, at the very least, I think, you should have to go back and find an offsetting series of programs that aren't working and say we're going to pay for this new program by eliminating these poorly performing old programs. Now, admittedly, that wouldn't necessarily save any money. That would obviously just be an economic, have the economic impact of one offsetting the other. But one is you don't continue to add programs on top of programs that don't work. And two is if you have that vigorous debate, you might actually be able to convince yourself that neither of these programs are an idea worth the American taxpayers paying for. Believe me, anytime anybody has a new idea for the federal government, there is some program out there that's not working well right now that we ought to consider whether we can continue to go in that direction or not. But again, also believe me, when you do that, the people that are somehow intimately involved in that program will be jumping up faster, higher, and shouting louder than any taxpayer who's paying the bill for their program that's not producing good results. Whatever specific plan we adopt to roll back spending, we have to realize the impact these policies have on society. Everyone